of the justice budgets, public defender, and so forth. It appears to be a strategy move between various political factions. As near as we can tell, there was a conference call today that the sheriff has filled us in that a lot of what's going on is about strategy, but it appears the May revise, which will be out on Wednesday, still includes funding for rural crime and some of the probation cops money and public defender and so forth and so on. So we're all anxiously awaiting the release this Wednesday. That will start to be analyzed by CSAC, RCRC, all the Sheriff's Association, the Probation Officers Association, and then next week, the 21st and 22nd is legislative days in Sacramento, which I'll be attending, and we'll be talking more in depth on those particular issues. But at this point, we're going through the normal process that we go through as the budget team does. Next Monday, we have you scheduled for an afternoon session budget workshop. We'll be talking more in depth of some of those things, and we'll be able to update you also on any issues that have come out on the May revise. Sort of the internal talk that's, I think, is going on in CSAC is we're going to have a very limited period of time to respond to some of these proposed cuts that are out there. So counties will be working toward developing a strategy. In some cases, it may just be a strategy about protecting what we can from the state, but the cuts are anticipated to come at all levels of government. So just wanted to reassure you that we are working through the normal process. We're refining our numbers. They're not pretty. There are some significant reductions that we're looking at across the board, but it's typically those are things we start unveiling to you a little bit at a time as we refine our numbers and work with departments. So I would tell you, I think we're much closer on a number now that I think we're closer to probably $1 million or $1.5 million shortfall, depending upon the circumstances and what happens with the state at this point in time. But then we'll be adding and subtracting things as we go along. So it's been an interesting exercise. I sat in all of the discussions as much to familiarize myself with the various budgets from the departments, and there were some curious things I learned and some alarming things that I learned. But I think that the process is working well, and the departments are involved and have been very forthcoming with the impacts that it's going to have on their department. So that concludes my comments. If any questions, I'm prepared to answer them.
Yes, please. Supervisor Delbar first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mitchell, in regard to the Senate Budget Subcommittee action, where they, without notice and actually adjourning the committee meeting, which to me is a flagrant abuse of the democratic process, but that aside, they stripped $506 million from law enforcement, myriad programs that really hit the rural counties extremely hard. And I know we are waiting for the May revise, but that action to me can't go unnoticed. And I would think that it's imperative upon this board to send very strongly worded letters to our senator, and then, since this has not yet happened in the assembly, to send a cautionary letter to our assembly member expressing our concerns about this and dismay at the manner in which this occurred to begin with, but then the fact that we can't continue on with those types of cuts, because that can't go any further than that 3-member subcommittee that stripped this out. I mean, that was pretty bad politics.
Well, we have a great deal of confidence in the Nick Warner and the sheriff's group that's working on this particular issue right now. So we're waiting for recommendations both from CSAC and also the Sheriff's Association to tell us how would they like us to respond. And as I said, they did have a conference call at 1 today. I haven't had a chance to debrief with the sheriff to understand what those recommendations are. If it's appropriate, I'm sure we'll be talking to you Monday afternoon as those recommendations come forth. It is about politics, and it is about sometimes forcing the dialogue, and that's the process we're in right now.
I'll defer to your your desires of waiting, but I think that somehow our state representatives need to know how, at least I'll tell you how I feel, obviously, that's no question, but how this board feels if it so does.
Right.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Pinches.
I find myself in a weird position here trying to defend the state, but when you're talking about, I would say probably it's going to be in excess of, when the accumulated budget deficit of $20 billion, it don't surprise me that they're, that seems to be a kind of minor hit from all of the law enforcement agencies when you look at the big picture. One thing that I'm concerned about is the governor up until now has basically said, well, transportation is off the table. And now I'm very concerned, especially what the rumors are in Sacramento, what's going to happen to our, Prop 42 monies, actually probably even maybe suspension of, I don't know how they can do it legally, but suspension of the rest of the bond funding issuance of those dollars. So I don't think when you're talking about a $20 billion deficit, and it's not just the deficit that the state is worrying about, it's a severe cash crunch that they're faced with. That is probably more short-term an issue that they're going to have to deal with. The state of California, even though it's unlawful to carry a budget deficit, they've been doing it for years, and it's just been doing nothing but accumulate. So they're basically handling it the same way as the federal government does, is their annual deficit runs into a long-term debt. And that's what the fact of what they're doing, even though at the state level it's illegal, but they're doing it anyway. So they're going to, if they can't get out of paying the counties, they're going to get away with at least prolonging the counties, and it has the same effect on us because we got to have the money in the bank before we can spend it. So anyways, this $500 million cut to law enforcement, actually in the big picture of things, probably isn't that bad. I mean, the state just don't have the money. That's I think something a lot of people realize. They're trying to lobby for money, but the point of it is there is no money in Sacramento. They borrowed all they can, they spent all they can, and that was during the good years. I don't know how they're going to survive the bad years. My question is this projected 5% assessed value and valuation increase, is that confirmed from the auditor's office? Is that pretty,
Yes.
That seems real good to me.
Yes.
That's good news.
Yeah, that was some good news, and Meredith gave us that news last week, which is part of why our larger number came down. So I think if you look at Mendocino County, because we didn't have the huge growth that other counties had in housing, that again has worked to our favor because we have a relatively tight housing market. And so in some instances that may actually help our property tax values.
Well, and on that, we have some activity going on within the county. I just expressed some of it earlier today, some of the things that's going on in my district. Those projects are major assessed valuation increases. So we do have some things going on. So, but I was real pleased with this 5% increase number. I mean, it's not as good as last year, which was what, 9.5%, but it's not. It's better than I thought it was going to be.
Every county has different circumstances. I got a little bulletin earlier today that San Luis Obispo County that was struggling somewhat, although they have good reserves. PG&E is moving forward with replacing some generators at their nuclear plant. Those generators will add about $3 million to new property taxes that'll come through an assessed valuation. So everybody has unique circumstances depending upon projects that are working in there, and some go up, some go down. But I think Mendocino County overall, the board has made some. I know it was a painful decision about our